forget, please, we need likes to encourage our speakers. That's a round of applause to them. So they can know you are there. So they can know you are there. Thank you. I know it's for the speaker, but thank you for giving me the likes. Hi, Titi.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. So I will exit now and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Shediwali. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, just in case it's different locations that you are actually joining me from this 28th day of August 2020, a year like no other. Making no assumptions at all, I will do a very brief introduction of who I am. I'm Titi Akisanmi, as the name indicates. I have been working in this sector. It's going to be 20 years in a few weeks. And I wouldn't say I stumbled into the sector. I would say my curiosity led me into the sector. This afternoon, I will be speaking to you around being able to, what I have framed as solving for Africa, how policy can influence African technology. I have on my presentation, and I do hope that you all can see that. If you can, continue to give me a big screen, or someone can let me know on the other side if I need to be able to present on a larger scale. My keynote, I know it's indicated as a keynote, but I oscillate between two things. Do I want to spend time reading to you from a speech, or do I want to be able to actually have a conversation? And a conversation which means to a certain extent quite interactive, to the extent that I can and that time permits as well. I will be walking through today based on, the following, outline. I'll do an introduction. I think that I did that already. I'll talk around if we really believe that the policy works. I'll look at the historical influence, the ones that I can actually speak to. I'll look at effectiveness and efficiency, the push-pull of policy. I will speak around solving for Africa, looking at particularly two key areas. And then I will speak around the path that I started. Hello.
I'm sorry for interrupting you. Hi. So you are not sharing your screen. Please, can you share your screen with us now?
I thought I was
presentation. Yes. So when you were back, so you should be able to share it. Yes. Now we can see your screen.
Awesome. Do you see it? In terms of our practice today. So you see it. Yes. I'm a mixture of the old and the new. So in as much as I have my computer here and I have another computer that I'm working with to be able to ensure that I'm actually interactive. Old school girl that I am, technology works, but I still have my speaker notes, right? I have a number of things outlined here that I hope can ensure that I make the most of the 35 minutes that I have with you. A couple of caveats. In as much as I'm Titi, the policy wonk and the tech wonk, because we are living in the COVID era, and I'm currently working from home, please do not be surprised if I have little humans show up. I'm a mother of two beautiful girls right now, and they actually yesterday evening, the 8-year-old said to me, "Mommy, can I please help you with your speech?" I said, okay, you actually can. Instinctively, sometimes you feel like, oh, absolutely, it's not something you can contribute to. But she said something to me. She said, Mommy, if you're going to be speaking about policy is around regulation. The fact that my 8-year-old knows around what regulation is tells you that, this is what I do. This is what I wake up and sleep to. And so it's a bit like, when we're driving around and we see those speed limits that are put around. And I said, yes, that is correct. That's a bit like, what the role that government plays more often than not, or a coalition of governments or a coalition of government and private sector, where they come together and they determine that on this particular stretch of road, this is how far you can go or not. So that's a lot of what I've been doing over the last few years. I have been privileged. I'm a Nigerian by birth, but I've been privileged to live not just in Nigeria, but I've lived in South Africa, I've lived in Mauritius, and I've done extensive work, which means I've spent extensive times, even if I'm not domiciled in Ghana, in Egypt, time spent in Kenya, time spent as well in Senegal. And a lot of that work has been shaped around looking to influence and help governments particularly shape regulations and policies as it actually pertains to what we now call the digital economy. And one of the things I have realized over time, I've also worked in academia, and I recall that one of the slides that I usually work with is showing that of the jackrabbit and the tortoise, and actually indicating that no matter how much policies are put in place by governments, consistently it's chasing after technology. That's both a plus and a minus. And I'll let as I go through, you'll get a bit more around why this is the case. But for us to be able to have a good conversation around being able to solve for Africa, not just in the moment, but particularly as we move forward, it's important to be able to look at the past and spend some time in the present as well, on what it is that we've done historically. And based on that, I'm going to be speaking around some of the policies I've had an opportunity to historically influence. For those who are very familiar with the sector, the slide I'm currently showing you details I do hope it's the latest version, details the submarine cables that surround our continent. I recall when I really started speaking to Access, and it had to do with a project called Afara. Afara is the Yoruba word for bridge, meaning being able to connect and bridge the digital divide. And there's a whole backstory to that as well, but that's not for today. That we had very few to no cables at all surrounding our continent. It was perceived that that continent, it was the space where nobody really had internet access because there were really just no cables surrounding it. However, with consistent engagement with government, on the one hand, government being prepared to listen, not just to civil society, but also to business, to see the potential opportunity that exists. More countries opened up their landways, more relationships were pulled together, and we're now in a time and in a space where we do have more submarine cables, including two that are being planned by two of the largest digital firms in the world right now, Facebook and Google. Google's is called Equiano, and actually will be landing in a range of countries across, coming from Portugal across the whole of West Africa into Southern Africa as well. So we've been able to solve to a large extent for that part of access on our continent through cooperation, through government forward thinking. Some of that forward thinking has been significantly around being able, it's like drawing teeth. You go to the dentist and you're trying to get this deeply rooted but painful tooth out. To create space for innovation. So that's that on the one hand, where government has been cooperative. Note I said cooperative and not proactive around being able to work with a wide range of partners to light up the continent, so to say. Connected to that has been the work that I've seen happen on our continent. And again, recall that the experience that I speak to has happened over many years. So if you forget anything else, don't forget this. That doing policy work, policy and regulatory work on our continent and being able to engage with it, either as someone from, as a developer, individual developer, or as a startup, or as anyone working in the economy really, takes time. It doesn't translate into an immediate solution. Sometimes it does, other times it does not. One of the examples when it works is I'll talk around infrastructure sharing and being able to bring regulations around infrastructure sharing, particularly around cable laying inland into various countries. Think Nigeria, the Nigerian example is far from perfect. Think South Africa, think Ghana. Where there has been success in getting both the private and the public sector to work together. However, it hasn't always worked, but an innovating sector solves for this. Note what I said, an innovating sector solves for this. Where it looks like policy is a hurdle, it's an opportunity, if you're in the business sector particularly, for you to be able to solve for that hurdle, meaning creating newer parts. And that has happened. So I've spoken around access. The other one I'd like to be able to talk around, and I'm not moving my slide very deliberately, is this. The ability to, over the last few years where policy has worked and has been able to influence the future of Africa's technology particularly, has been around regulatory sandboxes. This is where I miss live events, because at this point the teacher in me emerges and I ask immediately that, would you please show your hand if you understand what it is I'm talking about when I say regulatory sandboxes. Regulatory sandboxes, in the simplest of terms, is an opportunity that government creates through regulation for businesses, startups, ideas that does not fit neatly into one economic sector. Gives them an opportunity to continue to innovate. In every single market on the African continent, or in most of the African markets, there is one form of regulatory sandbox or the other. However, I want to be able to speak to Mauritius. Nigeria, interestingly enough, does have one, or a form of one. Egypt, and I think the most aware that, the one that has been most visible in the last few years is Rwanda. These are countries that have been deliberate about recognizing the opportunity that the digital economy or the internet particularly presents, and then being able to shape regulations such that they can attract not just local talent to be able to develop these ideas, but more importantly, be able to attract international foreign direct investments, also attract others, other players from the African market. This in itself has resulted in amazing innovation that has happened based on this. And, I could go out and list significantly some of those that have emerged out of Mauritius, that have emerged out of Nigeria, that have emerged out of Ghana and Senegal as well, including Kenya. Again, note, I am not at any point in time indicating that it's because the regulatory environment has been perfect that these innovative, startups, etc., have been able to emerge. Far from it. However, I am indicating that having those policies in place, or a recognition of them, or sometimes a lack of these policies, actually has presented that opportunity for innovation to happen. So let's walk back to the push-pull of policy based on what I've just said. Incremental does not negate the ability to leapfrog. That speaks to my last point, that policy, in as much as we want to be able to have the right policies in place around ride sharing, those who know me know I've been speaking quite a lot about what's been going on, particularly in Nigeria, Lagos State, or it doesn't always have to do with the ability of government to push out a lot of regulations seeking to engage with and quote and unquote control a sector that they see as succeeding. And I think the digital space, those who play in the tech startup space, particularly online, have seen quite a lot of focus, particularly from tax authorities, whether you are in Mali or you're in Mauritius or in Rwanda. One of the things that have been emerging significantly and that I've been spending a lot of time reviewing is the concept of digital tax. Everybody knows everything. There's significant things happening online right now. The concept, the perception is that these digital economies, these digital players are making a lot of money, but it doesn't really translate to that. So there is that. So that said, to make this point that there's also a place for failed policies and regulations in our shaping and solving for the African continent. I'm a firm believer in success. Yes, everybody believes in success. But I'm also a firm believer in being able to fail and learn from regulations that are significantly obtuse. When I say that not to mean that we deliberately move into a mode where governments, particularly who make these regulations, who makes these policies, are left alone, right, to put policies in place that stifle sectors. No. But where the work of influencing such policies fails, meaning, if I give an example, working on a lot of policies around being able to address digital rights or data localization particularly, and this for me is a solid example, and I'll speak more to my work around data particularly lately, towards the end of my conversation with you today. Is this: in a particular country, it's taken 7 years of my life's work, 7 years of speaking to a particular government and letting them know that, and when I say speaking to, it means I'm speaking through a range of partners, for them to realize that enforced data localization or data localization in general is not the way to go. It's not the way to grow your economy. It's not the way to grow your GDP or your bottom line. Why? Because where you enforce it and you don't have the infrastructure in place, even if you have the infrastructure in place, where you're looking to enforce data localization in a non-geographical, boundaryless, quote unquote, digital space, the internet, you will fail. And it's taken 7 years. Now, if I put on my entrepreneurial hat, that is not time that I have as an entrepreneur. But did that mean that you then step back and not engage with government or help them come to the realization that these laws are stifling? Absolutely not, because that is not constructive. And I think that's where we consistently fail as the innovating entrepreneurial sector. Note, I'm not just saying tech startups, etc., but I'm saying as businesses on our continent, where we fail is we tend to think that, government will be government will shape its policies. I'm just going to go and try and continue to be within the law, but I will try my best to just keep working and not engage. That is a significant problem. If we're to solve for Africa, if we're going to ensure that policy can continue to positively influence, right? Positively influence future African technology, we need to be more engaged as a sector. So like I said, it's not an issue of complete failure of technology policies. Far from it. Actually, I see it as an opportunity both to learn, where policies have been put in place where it looks like it's actually contracting the ability of a sector to grow. We have an opportunity to be able to engage, taking learnings from other parts of the world, but not verbatim, being able to localize and contextualize them. I have a feeling that, there might be interest in, how do you influence policy, etc. I can speak to that really quickly at the end of my conversation with you today. So moving ahead, right? How do we solve for the future? Particularly since majority of those in the audience this day is actually from, the tech sector. And that's my assumption. If you're not in the tech sector, there are learnings you can take. If you're from government or if you're from other sectors that are looking to be able to adopt digital technologies, there are learnings you can take. So ability to be able to solve for the future, keeping in mind, or, from a policy perspective, is this. We need to be able to continue to strengthen and enable innovation. So we need more policies in place that actually does not contract growth, but enables it. And at this point, for those who know me, I'm going to be very specific. We need less of what is going on in Lagos State. We need less of the closing up of economies like we're seeing out of Ghana. And we need more of opening up, right, of engagement, of work across board. At this point, I will speak to, and I hope that, we're all aware of this. Just give me a second. Yes. I'm speaking of, if you want to be able to influence policy, the African Free Trade Agreement. I was very deliberate in putting up this picture. One of the first few things I'll indicate is, if you really zoom in into that picture, you'll see there are less people like me. That's one of the things we need to be able to address in terms of innovating. When you are solving for a market, you need to be able to keep in mind the dynamics and the data that it reflects. This leadership does not reflect the reality that's on ground. And that instantly points out at someone who has spent time in looking at the influence of gender on decision-making, etc., is something that significantly needs to change, right? But we're not talking too much about politics today. We're talking about the regulatory environment. So for those who are not aware, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement finally has come into force to a certain extent. But there's an opportunity right now for you as an institution, for you as a startup, for you as an individual to actually influence the digital trade agenda of this, of this African agreement. An opportunity to be able to impute into it, an opportunity to be able to influence how your government is able to translate it. So we can deal less with issues around, border closures that influence and completely negates what this agreement is around. July 1 is when it was supposed to have gone into force. But again, speaking to failed policies, we have the African Free Trade Agreement, very future-looking, very, there's a lot of positives you can actually talk about it. But on the other side, we have the majority, if not 3/4 of African countries, not even having solved properly for access, including the large countries, including South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, right? The large economies, and Ghana, where not everybody has equitable internet access. How do you have free trade when you are looking to be able to grow your digital economy, but, we have not solved for that in a basic way. And where we think we solve for it, we continue to have, policies that come into place that look to monopolize and, drive our competition. So that's a key example of how we can continue to influence the future of African technologies around innovation. I want to be able to see more innovation policies being put in place, innovation policies that strengthen and enable particularly the use of data. Let's move on to the next thing. So the use of data. I have here, and I'm not sure if everybody will be able to see it. We are all sitting virtually, so it's not going to look really weird if you zoom in onto your computer or whatever device you're actually able to engage with this on. I have here something from I believe it's Domo that talks about that in 2020, the numbers around the data that's being generated every minute of the day. And we all know that 2020 has been a year like no other, right? I've been working in the digital space and making a case for more things to happen virtually like this, so we don't all have to travel, probably for the last 10 of the 20 years that I've been working. And as such, 2020 has put us in a place where there are over 41.6 million WhatsApp users sharing messages per minute, 1.38 million calls, voice calls, over 6,659 packages being shipped by Amazon, business occurring on Instagram at about, in terms of clicks, 138,889. And a whole range of those. We're not going to talk about Twitter because I think Twitter, a lot more of us are even used to that space. There's DoorDash, there's Netflix. Netflix has more or less erased, even on the African continent, the capacity to be able to engage. And what we see, and I deliberately landed on Netflix, is that where government has not been prepped for the incursion of digital in a 2020 reality, there has been this mad scramble to review, reinvent, and reshape broadcasting laws from Nigeria to Egypt to South Africa. Some in a way, through video, film and census boards, through the national broadcasting authorities, have tried to do that in an inclusive manner, right? Not reactive. But that's a critical path that I see that as a creating continent, we have an opportunity to shape policy and regulation in a way that continues to enable innovation. That's on the one hand. The other thing I want to mention here is that I want to break that notion, if you happen to have it in your mind or entrenched in any way, that data is not oil, data is not gold, right? Gold and oil are finite resources. In simple terms, gold, at one stage, we will have no more to mine and we'll need to remine. Oil is a finite source. At a certain point, we got to stop, right? And we won't be able to make use of it. However, data that drives the digital economy, it's not going anywhere. It is as infinite, right? I'll phrase it this way. Data is as finite as humans, right? For every computation that's been able to put in place, you as an innovator in the digital sector, for every single moment, that you think you have grasped all the subsections of the data you want to be able to create to respond to a gap or to meet a business need, either in the agricultural sector, in the health sector, etc. As soon as a variable of a different human from within the same cluster or beyond, so think, you've captured all the data around all the humans on the African continent. As soon as somebody comes back home, when I say comes back home, meaning we have a returnee from diaspora, or you have somebody else who's able to influence that data set, actually impute into it, it changes. The possibilities of what you can do with it completely changes as well. So if we have that understanding in place, that data is critical, then I put it to you that the biggest way that we can continue to have an innovating sector where policy is positively influencing future African technology, and I hesitate to say future African technology because future is so relative. The next 1 minute is the future. The next 10 years is the future. Is our ability as a continent, right? Our ability as the entrepreneurs in this sector to be able to shape, rethink, and adjust what we call the data protection and privacy environment of our continent. And I say this with a bit of, combination of excitement, but also sadness, because this is a song I've been singing for so many years, that we as a continent are far from prepared on the policy and regulatory front to manage or handle the data-driven digital economy that we have on hand. And I said that with, like I said, with some excitement, but with also some sadness. Why? Because if you look at, mention the three big economies, right? And, not belittling any of the smaller economies. I'll come to them in a bit. South Africa's data law just came into full force this year. This is South Africa. Kenya was in the middle, got a data law. And I'm not saying any of the data laws that are currently in place are perfect. No, not at all. Kenya got its data law in place. And then there's the attempts to be able to create the Data Protection Commission. I know that the hiring process was paused all of a sudden. And then you have Nigeria. Huge, vast numbers being utilized, being generated, business, quote unquote, ongoing, but no data protection law. I know attempts were made last year. I know this year there's now a draft bill, which you, if you're Nigerian, or even if you're not, have an opportunity to be able to impute and comment into. There's a window till the 10th of September. That's just been put in place. Now, this is why it's both a positive. Remember, push-pull is both a positive and a negative. In that, yes, it looks like these laws have come in a bit later in these three countries, but it presents an opportunity for us to be able to shape them in a way that does not stifle innovation, which means that in pulling it together, we ensure that the laws are not prescriptive in nature, just speaking to a particular technology, as opposed to speaking to the potential, right, use of data that might emerge, knowing that we cannot capture all of it, but putting enough caveats in place such that if technologies emerge that don't quite sit within that and their use of data, we can continue to influence it. All of that said, to countries that, don't really have a data protection law in place. But then remembering, Mauritius, I indicated I had lived in Mauritius earlier on in my work life. It has one of the oldest, it actually has the oldest data protection law on the continent, which got adequacy to the GDPR. But I have a conversation around the GDPR. The GDPR is great, but however, the GDPR is not necessarily shaped to suit or strengthen the African market. It is shaped and put in place to strengthen the European market. And we need to be able to understand this, even as governments are pushing to be able to put adequacies in place so that they can trade with the EU. That's what we need to be able to do with the African Free Trade Agreement. And not just government. You have a voice. And I think that brings me to my last comment. Senegal is the other country, where they have a really great, they've had a data protection law in place for a long time. However, I want to be able to point to Ghana as a solid example of a really great data protection law. Great does not equate to perfect. I think in law in general, perfection is something that, in the world in general, perfection is not something that's achievable. But we need to be able to recognize that there are countries that have been able to set standards. How many more minutes do I have?
1 more minute.
Okay, I will try and wrap up in that 1 minute. So recognizing that innovation is in place, right? And recognizing that there's an opportunity presenting itself with data. There are a couple of things I want to be able to end with. If you're in the entrepreneurial sector, you have a significant role to play to influence future African technology. But more importantly, if you don't see yourself in any of these buckets, you for sure are an end user, right? Think consumer. And that is a strong voice that we're completely missing on the African continent. An opportunity as an end user, as a consumer, to influence these policies based on your use of the technologies, right? To my last slide, let's see. I have had the opportunity, I'm a contributor on this, this World Economic Forum paper that's just emerged in July that talks about a new paradigm for business of data. I'm more than happy to share the links to the paper later. But one of the key things is that, the data that we have emerging out of all these conversations, etc., presents an opportunity for us to reshape policy, both as business practitioners, but also as governments and as civil society. So if you're not going to remember any of what I've said over the last few minutes, please remember this. Can policy influence future African technology? Absolutely, positively and negatively. However, we have an opportunity to be able to shape it in a positive way, but we need to be able to find our voice as developers, as startups, as entrepreneurs, but more importantly, as a collective, shaping the future of the African continent. And I think that we have a few of those opportunities, including with the African Free Trade Agreement and on platforms like this. So thank you again to the TechPoint team for giving me the opportunity today. I'll hand it over back to you, Wale.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please, let's give her a round of applause, a virtual round of applause by our likes. Let's give likes. Likes, that's a virtual round of applause. Titi, that's for you. So people are saying thank you from every part of the world, from different parts of the world. Thank you. You see the likes. Likes is just coming. People were actually begging that we should give you more time, but we are sorry we won't be able to do that. I know next time we'll still. You can follow her on Twitter. Please drop your Twitter handle so people can follow you on Twitter and they can continue the conversation. And if you have other questions as well, some of the people that ask questions, go to community.techpoint.africa to drop it. We'll get it to answer those questions for you. Thank you so much. So with this, now we are at the end of the conversation. We are end of the conference. Thank you so much for joining us. Please help us like it for our partners, and let's give a round of applause to our partners and our sponsors. Patricia, our Unicorn sponsors. We have Loraton, Exhibitor, Stanbic IBTC. We have Host Now, Media Point. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bento. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. And now the next thing to do is to go to the next stage. And maybe I should take one person just for a recap or just to speak on behalf of everyone for the conference, or on behalf of the attendees. One person can raise their hand if you want to come. I will just invite you for 1 minute. Someone should, if you raise your hand, you can speak on, or let me see if I have time. I'm trying to invite someone now. Okay, I'm inviting Kenechukwu. Okay, I think Kenechukwu is online now.
All right. I'm here.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just happy for the I'm just happy for the privilege you guys gave us to come online, to learn some things. I learned a lot of things today, especially from the woman that just spoke, Mrs. Titi. She actually said a lot about the policy stuff. I'm really interested about the policy stuff. If Nigeria can really get to the point of understanding that depending on another man's economic structure is going to affect, is never going to make our own better or us being a competition to the world. So I really stand with her, and I'm happy for the opportunity she gave us, and I learned a lot today.
No problem. Thank you, Kene. So next up is Anu.
Hello, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and thank you, Mom. I've learned a whole lot. I actually fall into the category of the people that I tend to just, when I think about policies and how it's influencing a lot of things and how our government's actually getting it wrong with some of the things they come up with, it's kind of saddening, and I sometimes feel incapacitated. But listening to you talk today about some of the things that we can actually do, even though some of us are just end users, not necessarily entrepreneurs in this space, that we still actually have a voice, and we should consciously work towards influencing, getting the government to listen to us, so that these policies that they are coming up with are not just affecting the businesses, because they're not just affecting the business, they're also affecting us as the end users and the continent in general. So thank you, Mom, for this very insightful session. I think this is like my favorite session of this whole conference. And thank you, Techpoint.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Anu. Thank you so much. So next, Jeremiah.